Perfect. So we'll just go with it. And I'll do a countdown so that I can, well, actually it won't take that much to edit this because we're just going to start. So 3, 2, 1. Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Circle Up and Get Real, where we talk about things that matter with people who matter. And today I am so excited to share with you a friend. I'm going to call you a friend, Marianne, because I've met you in person.
Please do.
And also to let people know, I've known of Anne Em Radmacher for most of my life. So I need to go there and tell you about that. But Anne Em Radmacher is, a creator. She's been creating inspirational, original artwork in the gift industry for more than 35 years and has written and published over a dozen books. Marianne, I met you, not really in person, but I met you when I was in college. And I don't know, I had some tough times at one point in my career or my college career. And I went to a gift shop and I found this poster and it was just beautifully calligraphied. Is that a right word? Calligraphed. Thank you. And the message just spoke to me. And I believe that one was the courage one. And I've known of you. I didn't know, this is going to sound really funny. I didn't know you were a real person. I thought you were somebody who was,
I'm not dead yet.
You're not dead yet. No. And when I learned that my friend Pam knew you in real life, I was so impressed with Pam because I thought if she knows this person who I have admired for years and years and years, I need to meet Marianne. And we did a few years ago in Fargo. You came to Fargo. So all of that to say, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
So I'm fascinated by your work. I know you as the work I saw when I was a college student. I didn't put a person with that. I put the artwork with that. And as we grow and we appreciate things in different ways, I'm much more curious about the person who created that beautiful artwork. And that's why I wanted to have you on today to just talk about who you are, the inspiration for all of these poems and books and stories and artwork. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I'll start talking and then I'm going to stop talking. The one I'm talking about that I found in college was "Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes courage is the quiet voice at the end of the day saying, I will try again tomorrow." Marianne, I've seen that quoted everywhere. I've seen that for years. And can you please just fill us in on who is Anne Radmacher? Good question.
Well, I'll start with the young person who had a decided proficiency with language. I was hospitalized for a very long time before I was even 2 years old. And I was in isolation, the isolation ward. And the tenderness that the staff, the interns, the physicians showed to me was manifested in this way. They had work to do. There was no babysitters at the Oregon Health Sciences University Hospital. And so interns, students, staff, and physicians would come into my isolation tent and read me their reports, their textbooks. Physicians would do their dictation. And so in this seminal time in my life, I was exposed to words of multisyllabic rolling off the tongue, which fast forward to today means that I say with alacrity instead of I'll do that speedily with enthusiasm. I love words and came to it really organically so young in my life. So writing was the way that I made sense of a unsupervised childhood in a divergent, dysfunctional, alcohol-occupied family. I wrote to make sense of the things that made no sense to me. And I wrote my first poem in second grade. I started my first journal when I was in fourth grade, wrote a play, and all along the way, I had adults in the form of administrative staff members and teachers who encouraged my verbal and written skills, but nobody encouraged my entrepreneurial spirit or my desire to produce art. And in fact, I wanted to take art as an elective when I was a freshman in high school. And there was a little vetting, a little test you had to take to qualify for that elective. And I was told that I had no discernible artistic skill, which I both immediately believed and dramatically disbelieved concurrently.
Do you remember that? Do you remember
Oh,
feeling that at the time?
absolutely. Part of me said, wah, wah, you knew it. You're a sloth. You have no artistic skill. You just want to be one. You're not an artist. And the other part of me knew that something in my core longed to deal with color and form, but experts told me I had no discernible skill, which meant I did not render perspective in the way that they modeled it in the test.
Mm-hmm.
But I render perspective to this very day the way it's not modeled in a test.
Right, right. And I think that, at least my opinion about that is, that's what attracted me to you. There's a market out there for that undiscernible talent because it connects with other people who maybe have been told similar things in their upbringing or their lives. And that's what I always knew, something that I couldn't articulate, and you did it for me.
And what I have found about my artistic expression is that it is actually no different than my poetry. My poetry uses form and a media to express a feeling and a thought, and my artwork uses a form and a media to express a feeling and a thought. And so once I was able to overcome that assessment, which happened in my mid-20s. So I carried that with me for more than 12 years, that I was no good. I still kept making art. Don't tell anybody. I still kept making art because I couldn't help it.
Yeah.
But I said, it's just for me because it's no good.
Right. And I bet you practiced it. I bet by doing it over and over again.
I did. And in much the same way, I longed to dance, Jodee. I wanted to be a dancer. And I registered for ballet my first year in community college. And boy, did I persevered, I want to tell you, with these young ladies my same age who'd been in ballet classes at the, local rec center since they were 4, and were tall and skinny and had these little etched hips. And about 6 weeks into the course, the ballet instructor called me into the class and called me into her office in the ballet room and said, I want to tell you that in my career of teaching, I have never met anyone with a more sincere heart for movement and dance than you. Wow. You are at your core a dancer. And I know you are going to find the right way to articulate that in your lifetime, because ballet is not it.
There's
Your
so much in that.
your center of gravity is not suited for ballet, and your hips are lovely. There's nothing wrong at all with the way you are made. It's just that you are not made for ballet.
Wow.
Now, if you're going to tell somebody you ain't not good at this, that is the way to do it.
Yeah.
And that, Jodee, is I'd always been fascinated by lettering and calligraphy, and had a whole experience in grade school with the way you're supposed to write and the way that I did write. And she gave me a map to discovering my unique lettering style that over the decades has come into, well, it's when I began my company, it wasn't anywhere as a style. And now it's prolific. And
Yeah.
I like to think that I had a little something to do with that.
I know you did.
Oh, thanks.
I do, because I think back on what attracted me to your work. Yes, it was the words. I'm a wordsmith myself. I love words. And there was something else. It was the way your words danced. I mean, really, if you think about it like that, you were given the freedom by this person who could have crushed you,
She could have.
but actually gave you permission.
Yes. And that it's not a model that I've had the grace or the maturity to follow in all of my life. But as I matured, I reached back to that example far more frequently. My friend Karen and I call it allowing yourself to be right without making the other person wrong.
Man, so good. This is why I love you so much, and I love following you and your work, because there is just something about using language in ways that brings us together instead of separates us that I've always felt drawn to, but haven't always had the words myself to articulate. And some of your work does that. A lot of your work does that for me. And if you go into a gift shop anywhere, anybody who's listening to this, you will find a Anne Radmacher poster,
Something.
magnet, card, something. You will, now that you know this, you will see it everywhere, because you are amazing. And I'm thinking of one now. It's a little square magnet that says, live with intention, walk to the edge, listen hard, practice wellness, play with abandon, laugh, choose with no regret, continue to learn, appreciate your friends, do what you love, live as if this is all there is. And it's black with
Yes.
like rainbow colors.
It's produced by a company called Quotable Cards out of New York City, and operated by Jillian and Matt, who were pals in college, both got literature degrees and graduated with literature degrees in the New York area.
Wow.
And they were like, okay, now what are we going to do for a living?
Right.
With our love of word? And would you like to know how those were?
Yes.
So they started their company in 1993. And one of the first pieces that they added into their lineup was that piece, Live with Intention. And Matt thought, as you did, Jodee, that I was long dead.
Yeah.
And so it was on a card and a journal and a poster and or magnet.
Yeah.
Like a little square poster.
Yep.
And a representative, a sales representative from that particular region came to me at the New York Stationery Show and said, I didn't know that you had a license with Quotable Cards. That's so exciting. And I said, what's Quotable Cards? And I don't have a license with anybody. So I walked into later that day, I walked into the booth at the New York Stationery Show in 1995 and picked up the pieces of my work and sat down at a table, and Matt came over and said, well, we love that saying. And I said, so do I. I'm Anne Radmacher and I'm not dead yet. With nods to the famous British Monty Python
Yes.
flying circus people. Matt just crumbled because of copyright law and not knowing who I was. And he saw a lawsuit smacking his young company, and he was just devastated. And I said, I think this could, I guess I was in a movie quoting phase of my life. I said, I think this could be the start of something wonderful. Let's have a chat about this after the show. And he said, oh, I'll take everything off the shelf. And I said, oh, don't do that. You have my name on it. We'll figure it out. And we did. All these years later, I have watched them grow up, and Matt has children, and they're still operating a company based upon their love of words. And and they distribute successfully all over the world.
Wow. I would like, how do I even say this? There's so much to unpack, and there's so much to talk about. I want to go back a little bit, and then we'll come back to this. How did you get to be you? I mean, you said 2 years old, you were in a hospital, and you had people reading to you, seeing you. It sounds like you had some great teachers and mentors and people who recognized your brilliance early, yet you had a tough childhood with alcohol and a lot of things you've told us. Where was this place in you that had the two parts that said, I can't do this because I'm not given permission, and I can't not do this because it's in me? Do you remember?
I do. I lived a contradiction. I am a contradiction. Even after all these years, I'm like a child when I see my work in a store. I'm like, oh my God, it's like my best friend put my work on their refrigerator. People call that humility, and I don't think it's humility. I think it's just absolutely being amazed.
It's like wonder.
It's wonder. It's, oh my God, I wrote that. And there it is on an arch, on a military base, on a door of a firehouse. It's that feeling of a child holding out their hands and saying, here, I made this for you. And the adult saying, instead of, yeah, I'll put it with the rest of the stuff, the adult saying, thank you, I love this. So the contradiction of my life, Jodee, is that I didn't know I couldn't. So I did. Because very few people taught me what I could do. My mother and father insisted that I learn to type, so I'd always have a job. When I took the skills test in high school for job placement, my verbal skills were the highest they had ever seen, but so was my eye-hand coordination. So the counselor suggested I go get a job at the local potato chip factory, picking burnt potato chips off the production line. What happened to my high verbal and written skills? Well, I was a female. Now, if I'd been a male at that time in our culture, I would have been lofted to a different path. But turns out those potato chip, I didn't go to the potato chip factory, but the hand-eye coordination became instrumental in the company that I started. Original art production studio distributing my work, first regionally and then ultimately internationally. I didn't know I couldn't.
Yeah.
When I was younger, I wanted to start a company, but I figured I'd have to be degreed and funded and older and experienced. I didn't know I couldn't, so I did.
So you did. Oh my goodness. Okay, so out of college, community college.
Not out of college, I got married. I married my second best friend from high school, and we were married um, oddly and companionably until we divorced uh, in my early 20s.
Okay.
We were both looking for home,
Mm.
and we were each other's home as friends, but not as married partners. So I always thought that after he finished college, I would go. That was our agreement. Excuse for that noise. But it didn't work out that way. So fortunately for me, a committed lifelong learner, not having a college degree has served my capacity to absorb information, because I don't have the opportunity to say, look, I'm certified in that. This is what I know.
Mm.
I have always sought to deepen my knowledge and enhance my learning because I didn't have the opportunity after high school. I didn't take the opportunity after high school to complete my college education.
I love the way you just said that. I didn't know that I could.
Couldn't.
I
Oh,
Jodee, I didn't know I could. So for my life, I went to college. I got the degree. I got the master. I did all the things you're supposed to do because I didn't have that piece in me that you have. And I did not learn things because the way I was taught was imposed on me.
yes.
You sought things out because it felt important and right to you, it sounds like. And so you pursued things that filled you up and lit you up and were applicable to what you were seeking, it sounds like.
Yes. And I think the ideal combination is the experience of higher education and conventional learning,
Yeah.
or conventional education, depending upon
Yeah.
your view of the structure, partnered with a commitment to being self-informed and expanding the depth of your personal agency. I the capacity to say, I don't know how to do this, but I know how to do this. Or I know people or systems who know how to do this. And then you go to those people or those systems to get the structures that you need to do what you want to do.
And it's there for everyone. It's there.
It is.
You've proven that out for years and years and years. And if people get stuck in a structure, for whatever reason, it's not that I was in jail as a kid having to do these things, but how we're wired, how we're programmed, how we're put into the world, I guess, produces a different pathway that we feel the need to follow. And I love how you've described the ideal scenario of education and learning and growing and producing and contributing because it's there. I think it's there. If I don't believe it's there, then I start looking for ways to be right about how everything's wrong.
Yes. That's an unfortunate truth that you just identified that's unfolding in our country as we speak, isn't it?
And we could focus on that if we felt
Good.
the need to do that. I think that's why your work is so inspiring to people and why people, I love your story about Matt and how he was just appalled that you were, not that he was appalled you were alive, but that you were, but that you weren't in public domain. I mean, you are still vibrant. And that's what's so fun about the way you handled that situation, because it certainly could have been handled differently, as you said. And it's just a testament to who you are. You are the words you write. And I recognized that when I met you in person.
Thank you.
It's
I write so authentically about failure, Jodee, because I'm so good at it.
mm. Well, but part of it is if we don't admit, that's what my whole platform is, get real. If we think we're not making mistakes, and if we think we're hiding that from anybody, the jig is up, everybody in the world.
Ah,
Part of living is making mistakes and learning from them.
when you overhear conversations anywhere, at any gathering, you don't hear people saying, oh yeah, I learned that when everything was handed to me in a silver platter and I got every tool and instrument that I needed to be this extraordinary success that I am today. The stories are, I know I was missing half of what I needed, and my business collapsed, and I learned when I had to give up everything what really mattered. Those are the stories that people tell, because that's where the life lessons and the learning emerge, because it's so unpleasant we don't want to do it again.
That's very true.
So we're gonna tap all of the resources that we have in the moment to try and avoid making the very same mistake again, so that we have the opportunity to make, new mistakes.
Well, and I'm picturing the dinner party you're at, or the social you're at, when you're overhearing that conversation. And I'm feeling that the story is born in the listening, right?
Say more about that.
Well, if you don't have someone with whom you can share your mistakes or the things that you are continuing to learn, or whatever you're sharing at that dinner party, then the story isn't developed. If somebody listens and says, yeah, that's stupid, that's dumb that you did that, well, then the listening has not provided the story to be formulated.
Mm.
And so in the listening, even in the hypothetical situation you just described, you were being an observer of the conversation that allowed the conversation to take more form,
Mm-hmm.
and to be more real. And so maybe the issue in our world today is that we just don't know how to listen.
And listening is half of the equation. The other half of the equation is that someone like you, Jodee, is committed to being real and telling the actuality of an experience. And in our polished, photoshopped, earn $100,000 in a month world, people aren't really telling the truth. I mean, maybe somebody did take that course and earn $100,000 a month, but I'll tell you straight up, it wasn't the first time they were doing whatever it was that they were selling that earned $100,000 in a month. It was practice and years and lots of failures behind it, but that's not part of the marketing story, is it?
It's not. That's not the shininess of the end result, because how would anybody want to buy something that they were told is going to be hard?
Yeah.
That's not sexy.
Hey, buy this from me. It's going to be the hardest, most difficult thing you've ever done in your life. And you will constantly ask yourself, what was I thinking?
Exactly.
And it's only going to cost you this much.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
No.
So, okay. So you're kind of alluding to building a business.
Uh-huh.
Will you explain how that happened for you? Because that is the hardest thing I've ever done, is be an entrepreneur without really knowing what I'm doing. So how did you do that? How did you decide?
Well, I was an entrepreneur without really knowing what I was doing. From when I was making grape perfume in my backyard and stuffing it into the smallest canning jars available and going door to door in my neighborhood, where I learned that even though my neighbors loved me, nobody was willing to trade coin for a sticky canning jar full of the scent of smushed grapes that was going to go rancid within 48 hours? Nobody. So I did learn immediately that the product matters as much as the message.
Yeah.
And in 5th grade, I found colored tissue paper, and man, did I go wild making bouquets of festive tissue paper, roses and chrysanthemums, and they looked like fireworks. And everybody in the neighborhood bought a bouquet. And in that day, I let them pay me whatever they wanted. And I learned another really incredibly valuable lesson that I applied later as an adult. Given the opportunity for generosity, people will surprise you. Everyone paid me more than what I would have asked. And there have been times in my life when I've made product offers with pay me the value that it has to you, which is generally not recommended.
Yeah, right.
By the marketing experts. And I don't do it that often. But the lessons from my entrepreneurial impulses from when I was very young influenced how I moved forward. I spent a great deal of money on packaging because I'd worked in retail. I knew that my employers paid hundreds of dollars, sometimes thousands of dollars, for things that I was responsible for opening, pricing, and placing. And they were delivered in bunched up newspapers. You would unpack the product and you'd have ink all over your hands. And I learned then to treat what I was sending out with the value that I'm asking people to pay for it. And so from the very beginning, when someone in my region who ordered any number of my first 18 greeting cards, it was like opening a gift. And I always included a gift, a little trinket, a stick of gum, a hard candy, something that said, look what you've done. You're helping me get my work out in the world. So I didn't know a thing about being an entrepreneur, but what I did know was what I loved about businesses that I'd been in. And so I gathered all of those experiences as a customer and applied it into the way that I developed my business.
And when was that? So when you said you worked in retail and you had other jobs, when in your life was it that you actually did this for real?
I had my first gallery show in 1985, and I had been generating original artwork for a gallery in the year before. And I started my greeting card company in 1986. I was working in a retail establishment, and the owner saw in me a potential and encouraged me, supported me with her years of experience in the business. She would often point out, see what you're doing for me in this business, you would take this into your own business. And so I started producing 18. I started with 18 cards. Another friend that sold a lot of greeting cards in his own store introduced me to sales representatives, and my work became represented in my state and the state over. And Jodee, the first order I got, keep in mind, in those days, everything was hand done because I wanted people on minimum wage to be able to purchase something beautiful and original at an affordable price. So the back of the card was hand stamped.
Wow.
The sentiment was hand lettered. The little art piece was brush stroked with chalk and finished with a fixative and then over painted. They were little pieces of original art. And I got an advance. My first order was prepaid, a dozen of all 18 cards.
Oh, wow.
And I wept. not, not from joy.
How am I going to do this?
Oh my God. I didn't know anything about inventory control and advance work. And, I just thought people would order a couple dozen and I could manage it. And it grew from there. So I was working full time, fulfilling orders, and becoming a very unsocial person because I was doing 2 businesses at one time. And that person who saw something special in me, a year later, fired me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was devastated. I loved her. I loved the job, but I was increasingly tired and worn from doing 2 very full-time jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, you could go on like this until it killed you, but you're not showing up for yourself wholly, and you're not showing up for me wholly because you're too tired. And boy, howdy, wasn't that the best time to be fired ever in my whole life?
Yep.
It felt awful.
Yeah, she, well, in hindsight, where everything's clear, she freed you up.
And she knew that's what she was doing.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time, it felt, because I believed I could do everything well.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I've learned just this morning, I had to remove a couple of things from my list. Because the belief that I can do everything well, it doesn't seem to have gone away.
Well, I think there are perfectionistic tendencies in some of us who, we have to manage around. So I think that's what makes your work so beautiful. And I'm wondering if when you were getting these huge orders that you hand wrote, was there ever a time when that became a job and you lost the joy in that part of it?
And when I did, I started looking for alternatives. It was a joy for about 8 weeks.
Oh, really?
I mean, what I recognized, and actually throughout my lifetime, I have had overuse issues with my right hand and arm. I recognized that at the rate it was growing, it was unsustainable, that I couldn't continue in the manner that I did. I reached out to a friend, and that phrase right there, I reached out to a friend. I said, even when I don't know, I know someone that knows. I reached out to a student of architecture and had a chat with him about the challenges I was facing, and his architectural mind helped my creative mind create systems that I use to this very day. I've used them for decades. I was walking around my home with my completely hand created wet paint pieces and setting them on top of every flat surface in my house. And then after the 18 hours required for them to dry, I would go and collect them all. And he created an architectural system that was easy to store, easy to manage, that allowed me to build up instead of out. Oh. And people that work for Amazon would recognize the vertical inventory management system that he created for me.
Wow. Wow. So it sounds like the universe called and you listened. And I think a lot of times we bury those calls. You had them early. You knew there was something in you that the world, maybe in not in this language, but there was something in you that you knew the world needed and wanted and desired, and that you were the only one that could produce that, which is why you tried to do it by hand for so long. How did that shift for you when you started the business of it?
Well, it was a necessity, Jodee. It wasn't a passion or a desire. When I prayed to be an artist. I prayed to be inspirational. I longed to have a positive influence on people. I didn't say, oh, great spirit, I want to be a successful entrepreneur.
Mhm.
I want to be an excellent leader and a stellar CEO. Those were not my longings.
Yeah.
Um, and in hindsight, I would have created a structure in which I partnered with professional services that recognized some particular deficits in that vision of mine. The company grew, the company really grew. I, at one point, had a wholesale operation that was supplying Barnes and Noble and several other big box stores, as well as independent retailers and retail clients. And I had 3 stores at, at one time. It was kind of nuts.
Yeah.
And so as Gail
Mhm.
Sheely in
She.
Passages
Mhm.
identifies the pinnacle of human growth, the a rise of acquisition, and then a decline of minimizing.
Mhm.
That's what's happened with me. And here I am 35 years later, through a series of very unpredictable circumstances, I'm back almost where I started.
Hmm.
The body of work is back in my hands newly after a journey in the hands of several other people for for 16, 17 years.
So there's a mystery here that we're uncovering. What happened?
um, the what happened are stories that belong to 2 other people. And what I can tell you is that in the period of time that I licensed out my lifetime body of work is when I really devoted myself to the life of an author,
Okay.
because I was not occupied in production,
Mhm.
creating uh, new releases, and managing uh, a team of various sizes.
Mhm.
And so the period of time in which my work was out of my hands and in the hands of other people,
Mhm.
I pursued my deepest calling. I've developed a style of artwork that is unique to me in much the same way that my lettering style is unique to me. It's proprietary.
Mhm.
And that couldn't have happened with the kinds of demands that were on me in a production context. So that's what I'll say about that mystery.
Okay.
And the next chapter is yet to be written. I'm in this very day in the process of discovering what it looks like.
So authoring, is it poetry that you're writing?
I do write a lot of poetry, and I managed to sneak poetry into my nonfiction work.
Yeah. Yeah.
But our culture um, warms to poetry thanks to Billy Collins, thanks to Maya Angelou, Mary Oliver, Naomi Shihab Nye,
Mm. Amanda Gorman.
Amanda Gorman, and my friend Martina McGowan, Dr. McGowan, released a book last year called I Am the Rage. So poetry is cycling back in to not relegated to dusty shelves
Right.
in our culture. But so poetry becomes part of my nonfiction work. I'm not I'm not the greatest writer, Jodee. I'm my
Says who? Compared to what?
well, I'm a poet.
Huh?
I'm totally behind the quality of my work as a poet. As a nonfiction author, no one reads my work and says, oh, she should write novels.
They're two different styles. You
they,
can't even put those in the same genre.
they are absolutely different styles. I'm being real, Jodee. My power as an author is in the stories that I tell and the lessons that I extract from real life circumstances. That is my giftedness. And I have friends who are far more skilled as writers than I am. Mm-hmm. And they have thoughts that go on different planes than mine. And so as a writer, I bow at the feet of my editors because they take my
yeah.
significant thought and premise and lesson and say, let's put this end at the beginning. Mm-hmm. And then it's better.
Yeah.
So I stand behind what I teach, what I say, and even how I write. And I recognize that I don't enter book competitions and things of that nature because honestly, my greatest reward is you. The reward I get from hearing you tell me that you encountered something I wrote in college and it lifted your sights.
Yeah.
It helped you through. That's not a statue I get to put on any flat surface in my home, but it's an award.
Yeah. Well, I need to tell you that there are probably scores of people just like me who've never told you because they don't know you. Didn't have the opportunity.
Don't know I'm alive.
They don't know you're alive. That could be true. That could be true. The reason I asked you to, one of the reasons that I asked you to be on my podcast is because one of my friends in my private Facebook group put one of your quotes out. He puts quotes every day from different people, and it was yours. Mm-hmm. And I went, this is so cool that this person who doesn't know you, because it could be, John Smith, Mary Smith, that are being quoted in these great thoughts that he's putting out as little memes, but you're a real person. And to me, that people need to remember that. People need to look around them to see who are the real people in their own lives that are brilliant and aren't recognized and aren't acknowledged for that. I love your story. I love who you are. And I'm moved by your authenticity and your genuine heart.
Thank you.
And that's what it means to me to be real. The real is an acronym for radical, energized, authentic, and learning focused. And if we can break all of those things down, being radical doesn't mean being crazy, wild out there. It means getting back to the root of what makes us us. Yes. Radish, it's a root. Radical integers can't be divided anymore. They get back to the root. And that, I don't think people want to do that these days because our world is not one that wants to slow down and get introspective. We have a lot of windows in the world. We don't have a lot of mirrors.
Ooh, you should write that down.
I'll write that down right now.
Yeah.
Well, and I feel like right now we're so busy looking out the window to see whatever is happening around us that we're not looking at what's happening in us.
It's true.
And you've helped me do that forever without even knowing who I was, without even knowing you were doing that with the work. You, you just listen to your muse, I think. Is that how it works for you?
I've been asked this question a lot. In fact, Pam Matchithiti,
Mhm.
who
My
introduced
friend.
us,
Mhm.
asked me to show a group that we were training together how I access the truth of my inspiration or my muse.
Mhm.
And this is what I said. Above us all is a weather pattern of knowing, of inspiration, of core truths, goodness, every good descriptor that you could think of, right, is above our heads. And if we just, in a reflective moment, reach above and swoosh it into us, it's available all the time, every moment. It's like a river above, not below.
Mm.
And so we can't necessarily, in the how I experience, is that I can't step into it. I can't jump into it. I have to rise to meet it,
Yeah.
which means my arms are up, my hands are open, and I can't get to that inspiration, that spirit of good, if I'm holding a bunch of stuff.
Mm. Mm.
I have to let the other things go, to raise my hands above my head,
Mhm.
open palmed, and draw it to me. That's how it works for me.
Love that. So is it a conscious process at a certain time? Or does it come to you even when your arms aren't up with your hands open?
Well, I I was caught saying a couple of decades ago to the question, when do you pray?
Mm.
And my answer, influenced dramatically by a 15th century monk named Brother Lawrence, was I pray when I'm kind. I pray when I'm thoughtful. I pray when I'm mindful. I pray when I'm cleaning my house. Everything I do, if it's not born of anger,
Mm.
and even sometimes when it is, because I've had the opportunity for anger
Yeah. Right, right, right.
in our country lately, and that can be prayer as well.
Mm.
So the idea of a sitting moment, mindful, contemplative, consciously reaching up into this river of inspiration happens when I write in the morning. I have a process called thought foddering that I do virtually every day. And it's how I start my day.
Mhm.
And it is a quiet, reflective time. And most days are not followed by sequences of quiet, reflective
Yeah,
time.
right,
They're
right.
followed by lots of other things. But how I begin my day sets the tone. So yes, in the middle of muck, in the middle of miracles, in the middle of any other M word or any other word starting with any
Uh-huh.
alphabet letter, there is a synthesis that occurs between perspective, intention, experience, and inspiration. The four of those things come together in a moment, and something suddenly makes sense.
Mm.
And like you moments ago said, we have a lot of windows, but not a lot of mirrors. And I said, write that down.
Mhm.
That's a synthesis of those things that happen just as you and I were talking. And it happens to people all the time, all day long, but they don't have the consciousness to hear that they've just taught themselves something that could impact the whole of their lives, because they have a momentum that keeps them from saying, ah, that's something.
That's the M word, momentum muck. You're
Yeah.
reminding me of M. So your name, Marianne M. Radmacher,
Yes.
what EM? What is that all about?
Well, in another divorce, in other news, in another divorce, my lawyer accidentally reverted my last name to my married name, not my given name. So when I got my divorce decree, it was not my name.
Oh,
It was the name of the partner that I was divorced.
yeah.
And so my lawyer reached out to that human and said, there's been a clerical error. I need you to come in and sign papers to declare that it was an error. And he declined. And so the lawyer went to the judge and said, her ex-husband is uncooperative. This was my error, not hers. Please restore her name. And the judge said, without permission of her ex-husband, she cannot have her name restored.
My.
So he went back to my ex-husband, who put a 4-digit price tag on signing those papers. So my lawyer made that offer to me, and I said, no. First, no. And let me think about it, and I'll get back to you. So I asked myself a series of questions, among them, how do I want to remember this? And what's important to me? My name. My name is important to me. And then I thought back to grade school. There were so many Mary Anns in my primary school that I was first called Mary, but that didn't work because lots of other people were still being called Mary. So my pals called me M or MA. And it stuck. And through my childhood, affectionate, kind, knowing people called me M. And that I was willing to pay the judge and the court system and fill out the paperwork, because the workaround for the clerical error and the uncooperative former partner was filing for a name change. So I filled out the paperwork, made the court appearance first, declaring that it is my name and offering proof that that's what I was born as, and then adding in EM. And then another court appearance where I was awarded my name. And that was a different judge. And she said, congratulations, this day you are claiming a name that has meaning and value to you. And I applaud you.
Wow.
Marianne M. Radmacher.
Beautiful. Wow. So Radmacher was your name.
Yes, my given name.
That you needed to get back.
Mm-hmm.
And by adding the M, EM, you were able to do that at the time and then later.
So, it's a pain in the butt, I'll tell you, to change your name. And it's why a lot of people wish they could or want to, but they don't want to go through the work of the library card, the driver's license, Social Security Administration, your tax filing, all that.
Yeah.
It's a lot of paperwork.
Yeah.
But when people say, I don't like my name, I ask them, what would you wish to be called if you could be called anything in the world? And then I tell them about the paperwork and the court appearances. And then they have a better idea of what they're saying no to if they're going to keep saying no.
That's great. So this leads me to, I know we could talk forever. We have been talking for a long time. So you work as a consultant, as an artist, as an author. What do you do when you do consulting? How does that work for you?
I work with corporations. Most commonly these days, I sometimes do customer service or group training, Generally, I'm hired to deliver keynotes. When I work with an individual client, I help them identify their objectives and what they're struggling with. And then we create a plan to address those things and work it out together. And when we're done, we go on our merry way. That's how I work with clients.
And how do they find you?
Word of mouth.
Mm.
I don't, if you go to my website, you're not going to find a big corporate presence. I'm very proud that I've worked for some amazing organizations. The greatest privilege is working with educational professionals. I love working with teachers because I am who I am because of the teachers that I've had.
Yeah. So if you could promote something right now, I know you have a book coming out. In fact,
I do.
This is going to be released on the 12th of July. We're recording it a little bit early, but that's your day. What's happening on the 12th of July, Marianne?
Courage Doesn't Always Roar is releasing on the 12th of July. It is a collection of essays that explore, well, I'll read the title of the book. Courage Doesn't Always Roar, and sometimes it does. Redefining courage with daily inspirations. And it is dozens and dozens of individual essays. The publisher, Mango Publishing, decided to call them lessons rather than chapters.
Uh-huh.
A remarkable gentleman by the name of Arthur Bushkin, the originator of the kindness cloud, years ago suggested that I write sequels to the Courage poem.
Oh, okay.
Expanding on the idea. And so I've written 9 of those as the headings for these essays, and they're very ordinary examples of how courage shows up as guts, as chutzpah, as disagreeing with yourself, telling yourself, yes, you can, instead of no, you can't. These are the everyday ways that courage presents itself, the opportunity for courage in our daily lives.
I love that. And where can they find that book on today, on the 12th of July? Where can we find it?
Amazon. It may or may not yet be in indie booksellers. The dream of every author is that people who are interested will go to their favorite independent bookstore and say, will you please bring this book in for me and my friends?
So do that, everybody, if you hear this and want more information. So how can people find you? Where would be the best way for them to get in touch with you and follow you?
I am on Facebook, and I have a website, maryanneradmacher.net.
.net, everybody. I will put that in the show notes.
Thank you.
This has been a joy and the beginning. I want to meet with you more often because I have a lot of things that I'd like to continue to explore about you, with you, through you. And we may or may not have another series here, or begin a series here with Anne Radmacher on the Get Real.
Well, I would be honored, Jodee. It's been such a pleasure to speak with you today.
Oh,
Thank you.
mine for sure. So as always, everybody, get real. See ya.